another discussion of the South Caucasus Dialogue platform format launched in February 2021. And in the beginning, it was supposed, my idea was to discuss possible cooperation opportunities and ways to move forward and develop some maybe regional, more positive environment, regional opportunities and possibilities of some kind of cooperation. But I would say that like in recent months, we again hear about some confrontation. Unfortunately, we received some information about that people die. And I would say not very optimistic statements. So today we received many news. For example, Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs distributed information that tomorrow on December 9th, first meeting of so-called 3+3 format will take place in Moscow. 3+3 minus 1, I would say, because Georgia is not going to take part. But anyway, officially or publicly, it is called 3+3. And some kind of confrontation is going on at the moment as well today. I don't know specific information, we will check later, but what we see is that we're not very actively moving forward towards some kind of resolution or cooperation opportunities. And very soon, in 6 days, we will have a summit in Europe, and then we will have a meeting in Brussels between Armenian and Azerbaijani leaders. And I would like to give the floor, first of all, to say thanks a lot to all our attendees, including ambassadors of different European countries, Czech Republic, Lithuania, Estonia, Finland, and other countries taking part today, attending today. Thank you for your support and interest to this topic. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Tойво Клаар to make his opening remarks and maybe highlight European role in South Caucasus developments, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and maybe Georgia also. Please, Mr. Tойво Клаар.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. And I apologize that I have to leave shortly. But regarding the European engagement in the South Caucasus, that is of course long-standing, and I would say with regard to Georgia, it has been very intensive over the years, and of course the EU is engaged with Georgia on multiple levels through our delegation, through the UMM, and also my team, and we just finished the 55th round of the Geneva discussions, where I am right now in Geneva, and while unfortunately, we cannot say that there is a lot of progress on this file. Nevertheless, the EU, through its various instruments, has been and continues to be very strongly involved in the Georgian conflict, and in also finding various ways of turning the dial a bit in this conflict. So we will be, and we have been, and we will continue to be engaged here. But of course, the last year has seen a huge change to the south of Georgia after the 44-day war. We have a different situation between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and while this bloody confrontation, of course, has brought about a lot of suffering, and people are still suffering the consequences, not only of last year's fighting, but of 33 years of conflict. We also see possibilities that we could move from what we have right now, a ceasefire, to a more durable solution. And during the past year, the EU has been much more strongly engaged, also in looking for ways of supporting Armenia and Azerbaijan in moving towards durable settlement. If in the past the EU's role was somewhat more limited in focusing primarily on supporting the work of the Minsk Group co-chairs, then now, of course, we still believe that this format is an important and indeed essential format in the relationship between and in trying to find peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Then we also see that there is more space for the EU to get engaged and in helping to support the sides in moving in the right direction. And so we have next week, at the invitation of President Charles Michel, we have the two leaders coming to Brussels for the Eastern Partnership Summit. And in that framework, President Michel has also extended invitations to both leaders for a separate meeting, and both have accepted. And so we're looking to make best use of that time in Brussels to try to also see how we can do more from the side of the EU in helping the sides move forward towards a comprehensive settlement and towards then building a different kind of South Caucasus, where the EU again has a very particular role to play, because you did mention that there is a meeting of 3+3 deputy foreign ministers coming up in Moscow, but where Georgia is not participating. The EU is supportive of all kinds of formats, as long as they are not exclusive. But we also believe that the EU has because of its specific relationship with all three South Caucasus countries, a particular role to play and a particular opportunity to bring those three countries together in exploring ways for new communications, new infrastructure, and new ties that would really help contribute to the entire South Caucasus in moving towards a new and better era of peaceful relations. Of course, this is a very long haul. This is not going to be easy, but again, because of its relationship and its good relationship with all countries in the South Caucasus, I think the EU does have a particular opportunity here, which we're certainly eager to grasp.
Just one brief question to you, if possible. Yesterday, I've read some research about the OSCE Minsk group, and it was stated there that maybe it is a time to redevelop somehow this format because it's not effective anymore. Do you believe that the OSCE Minsk group is still effective in after the Karabakh War and can offer something new to all countries?
Well, I believe that the OSCE Minsk group has a particular mandate, and it has, from all the Minsk group co-chairs, there have been expressions of a willingness to continue their role, and they just had meetings with the foreign ministers of both countries in Stockholm. So I do believe that there are definitely possibilities for the Minsk group co-chairs, and frankly, any format is a good one as long as the two sides decide to grasp that format for substantive negotiations. And as I said, the Minsk group co-chairs do have a mandate, and I believe it is important to make use of all the possible contacts, because as you yourself also mentioned, the situation while we have a ceasefire, it is certainly not yet calm and quiet, and there are tensions on the ground, which need to be addressed. There are many questions left unresolved, and not least also the issues that have brought about the existence of the Minsk group in the first place. So I do believe that there is scope for a lot of international engagement, including by the Minsk group co-chairs.
And it will continue and maybe will be even raised, right?
I think the important thing is not that we are that there are different. That's not a problem in itself if there are many formats and if there are many contacts. The important thing is to make sure that these are mutually reinforcing and don't become somehow obstructionist or don't start obstructing each other. And therefore, as long as there are activities that are mutually reinforcing, then I believe any and all engagement is important and welcome.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. It was Special Representative of the European Union to South Caucasus, Mr. Tойvo Клаар. And I would like to now present our distinguished speakers from Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. Today it's Ms. Sossi Tatikyan, who is independent expert in international relations and security, former diplomat for Armenia, and former peacekeeper as a political advisor and security sector reform advisor with the UN and OSCE. His ambassador Farid Shafiev, who will join very soon, the chairman of Center of Analysis of International Relations, and Mr. Kaha Kemoklidze, who is the former head of National Security Council's Office of Georgia and the security expert. So I would like to start with Ms. Sossi Tatикян. Please, could you please make your opening remarks focusing on current situation, in regard to what do you think, how countries and the region in general may move forward? Which formats are more useful for this process, like 3+2, I would say, with Russia in Moscow, or European Union meetings, or all these formats together will help? What is your vision, please?
Thank you very much for inviting me to this discussion, and let me greet other speakers and participants. I will actually start answering to your last question, because I agree with the EU, a special representative for the South Caucasus, that it's not about format, it's about substance. It's about, there is too much focus on the formats. But let me first address three kinds of problems that we have. First, it's Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and the second is divided into two groups itself, which is border situation between Armenia and Azerbaijan, delimitation, demarcation issue, and finally this dilemma of the blocking roads and communications versus corridor. So the first Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, of course, we can talk about this for hours, but let me just mention that it's obvious that the conflict is not resolved and through the military force, but it has even got deteriorated. So the Armenians there live in fear. There are multiple cases of civilians being kidnapped, shot, targeted, and even tortured while doing their regular livelihood activities. And we shouldn't allow this to be normalized. This should be condemned, and there shouldn't be impunity over such kind of incidents. We know that there is not even one Armenian left in the territories under Azeri control. And there are now 120,000 Armenians in Karabakh, but there are also dozens of thousands displaced. They don't receive humanitarian international assistance. Basically, there is no any international humanitarian international presence in Nagorno-Karabakh except ICRC and Hello Trust, the mining NGO. And Russian peacekeepers are the only security guarantor in Nagorno-Karabakh. And of course, we Armenians are very grateful for it. At the same time, it seems that Azeri side so far hasn't even signed the memorandum of understanding of Russian peacekeeping force. And peacekeeping force consists of only one component, military component, and it has no mandate from the UN or the OSCE. So this is not really a full peacekeeping architecture. I've served in 7 international peacekeeping missions with the UN and OSCE, and even with an EU contractor. And I know what means international peacekeeping. It consists of military, police, and civilian components. It's multinational, etc., etc. And it doesn't deal only with physical security. It deals also with political issues, human rights, governance issues, economic development issues. So without having all of that, Nagorno-Karabakh may turn into a gray zone, and which will be quite shameful, to be honest, in the European neighborhood. It shouldn't be allowed. And perhaps, and this is purely my personal view based on my personal work experience of more than a decade, a wider peacekeeping architecture could be considered, at least at the end of these 4 remaining years of mandate, such as Russian military component plus some other OSCE nations for other functions. This is just a thought to consider. And of course, EU contribution to this kind of peacekeeping architecture would be also very, very much welcome from my point of view. The other issue is delimitation and demarcation. So what came as a surprise to us in Armenia, unfortunately, was that Azerbaijan didn't stop in Nagorno-Karabakh after having launched a military full-scale operation. It started making military advances in Armenia proper, first through what I would call creeping annexation starting November 2020, and then starting May, even a military aggression, and it has occupied at least 40 square kilometers of territory in Armenian, in sovereign Armenian territory. So I was actually the first expert in Armenia who started talking about the need of delimitation and demarcation. I made my first remark about this on 27 November last year. And I'm glad that Russia mediated, and finally 3 countries announced about the start of this process in Sochi. At the same time, I have very deep concerns shared by many other experts and civil society. In particular, how can delimitation and demarcation run smoothly between 2 countries who are still in an unresolved conflict, and Azeris have their armed forces in the territory in our border areas, and it has basically proved a record of exercising a military force to achieve its goals. And also, I've seen how the delimitation and demarcation is taking place in other hotspots of the world, such as Balkans and African countries, and even Timor-Leste, which is a half island in the middle of ocean. And in order for it to run smoothly, a consultative voice of a third country, even our strategic ally and a powerful country as Russia is, may not be sufficient, and to prevent non-constructive behavior and use of force. That's why what I've seen in other parts of the world, usually there is an umbrella of an international organization and normative framework under an international organization. In particular, in the European Union and even in far away East Timor, I've seen the EU contribution through its integrated border management framework. And also, as we know, OSCE has a wonderful guide on the delimitation and demarcation, which it has developed based on its mediation experience between Belarus and Lithuania. So I believe that OSCE and EU's assistance in delimitation and demarcation should be considered and highly appreciated, especially if 2 sides mediated by Russia are not able to achieve consensus on controversial issues, and there are unfortunately many of them at the moment. So the other issues finally is corridors versus roads. Well, basically, Azerbaijan has been misinterpreting the substance of trilateral statements that urges both sides to deblock communications and roads. As you know, Azerbaijan and Turkey have been keeping Armenia in blockade since its independence. And we have been always the party that has urged to deblock communications and roads in the region and open the borders. And right now we have been again reiterating our readiness to deblock the roads, and in case of which there is absolutely no need for a corridor, since Azeri trucks or vehicles can simply pass as transit through the Armenian roads and go to Nakhichevan. However, Azerbaijan has been distorting this provision and demanding an extraterritorial corridor at the expense of Armenian sovereignty. And this is really, really not constructive, and this really violates international order and challenges the whole international law and order. Moreover, Turkey and Azerbaijan have been talking about reunification of Turkic word through the Armenian territory, and this is also, you know, something that doesn't generate a constructive environment. So I think that all countries should work together in a constructive spirit and not to aim to create new corridors. Remember the heritage of the Second World War, Danzig corridor, corridors and enclaves and locked up territories and walls and closed borders. These are not something that look good in the 21st century in European neighborhood. And there is a need to create a favorable environment in line with contemporary international standards, with respect for national sovereignty and not to use force, and also respect human security and human rights issues, because right now in border regions of Armenia, the situation is very disturbing. People, civilians, including children, live at a few hundred meters from the Azeri military, which is not normal in light of the contemporary international human rights conventions. So we need to really return to the spirit of contemporary international norms. And indeed, EU and OSCE can help a lot, such as Russia that has been helping, but Russia shouldn't be the only nation, because it's not fair, first of all, to Russia to carry all of this burden alone. So I would just request EU and OSCE not just limit themselves in humanitarian issues, because as we know, they are dealing with the return of the prisoners of war. They are dealing with cultural heritage preservation issues in territories under Azeri control. They also urge both sides to refrain from the rhetoric and aggressive statements. But very frankly, it's the Azerbaijani state at the level of the president that has been practicing a lot of hate speech and aggressive rhetoric. In Armenia, of course, there are individuals that use nationalistic and xenophobic language, but it has never been exercised at the level of political leadership, neither before the war nor after the war. So I would just urge everybody to be constructive. And I didn't talk about Georgia, but of course we are very keen in cooperating with Georgia in all issues of common interest.
We will get back to it in the second part. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you for your attention. Thanks.
Thanks a lot for your opening remarks. Yeah, and of course now we will move to Ambassador Farid Shafiev, who is here already, as I understood. And please, Ambassador, your opening remarks about what other issues preventing two countries or even three countries from moving forward. And I will also ask you, if possible, to comment on this 3+3 meeting. Why is it 3+3 when Georgia is not taking part? It's also interesting for me, please.
Thank you, Yegor. And again, I apologize because I'm traveling, so I just entered my hotel room. But now I'm able to speak. Indeed, I think that kind of exercise, talking together, very useful. I had a chance to talk with some of my Armenian counterparts in the past 3-4 months. Apparently, we have opposite views, but it's also useful to discuss issue because we believe that the future of the South Caucasus is in peace and cooperation. And responding just briefly to your question, what prevents South Caucasus from the peace? The simple territorial claims, territorial conflicts. My colleague from Armenia, she mentioned 3 issues. I would expand that we have actually 5 issues. The 5th issue is concerned mostly Azerbaijan, but it's the regional dimension. So let me start with the Karabakh issue. We have different reading the situation. We believe that the Karabakh is no longer international issue. It's the domestic issue of Azerbaijan. We offer Karabakhi Armenians reintegration into Azerbaijani society. For us, unfortunately, the presence of Armenian militaries, if you would take the experience of 30 years of occupation, it's resulted in complete elimination of Azerbaijani population, ethnic cleansing, and destruction of all Azerbaijani heritage. People who visits now the liberated territories, they see that there is no single roof, there is no single windows left in the liberated territories, formerly occupied territories. So for us, at least, what we're offering the Armenians in Karabakh, that's the chance to accept Azerbaijani rules and to be Azerbaijani citizens, and they have that option. Unfortunately, 1,000 people in Armenia, Azerbaijanis in Armenia, they didn't have that option. First, they've been cleansed in 1988-89, and then the population of Karabakh was fully ethnically cleansed. So that's about the Karabakh issue, which we believe we should incrementally work now with, mostly with Russia. The second issue is the blocking or delimitation, let's say delimitation and demarcation. Let's not forget that thus far, Armenia keeps under control, under occupation, several villages, more precisely 7 villages of Kazakh region of Azerbaijan from the First Karabakh War. There is one enclave in which Kerki near Nakhchivan, but also under our control we have in Gedabek region. So that's why we believe that we should indeed start delimitation and demarcation process. It's in our interest to get those territories back. The claim that Azerbaijan somehow encroached onto Armenian territory should be verified. For that reason, we believe that we should start indeed with delimitation and demarcation. The third issue is the blocking transport corridors. We believe, and here we might need, maybe it will be quite useful, the experience of European Union. Let's recall that after the Second World War, European Union emerged from the nucleus of steel and coal cooperation of 4 countries, Benelux countries, France, and when Germany joined. So I believe that the transport can be the same nucleus for the South Caucasus, especially taking into account we have very useful, very pragmatic, very successful example of cooperation between Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey. We have different reading of provision, article number 9 of the trilateral statement. We believe that indeed there is the elements which you can call it corridor, but at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't want to call it corridor, that's fine. The most important two items in that article 9, the first, I would like to draw attention that it speaks about unimpeded movement of people and cargo between Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan. And for us, it's the vital. Nakhchivan was under blockade. For many decades, we had to use the territory of third countries to get to Nakhchivan, and it was costly and more kind of bypassing. So through the Armenian territory, 40 kilometers, will have direct access. And plus, in the future, if the VAT corridor will be opened, railroad, Armenia also will have access to Russia. Pashinyan was speaking about that just a few days ago. Armenia will get access to Russia. Russia will get access to Turkey, and Iran also will get access to Armenia. And you know, we also will be connected with Iran through the railway. So it's an interconnection. But there is, besides these three issues, there are the fourth issues. There is the humanitarian issues. We have huge area contaminated by mines. Only recently, mines where the mine maps was given by Armenia. First, they denied even existence of landmine maps. It's only under pressure, and I would like to underline, sometimes we are accused that we have a bit, you know, rhetoric, or our actions a bit, how to say, coercive. But only through coercive actions we managed to, first, Armenia to admit that landmines maps exist, because we were denying it. And then, of course, incrementally, we got all those maps in exchange of people who were detained by Azerbaijan after November 10th. And the fifth issue is important for us. It's the restoration, rehabilitation of territories which were completely destroyed by Armenian side for 30 years of occupation. I believe in all these issues, though we have definitely an important role of Russia, and especially on delimitation, and now we have first we have trilateral already commission on the transport, the document signed on January 11th. And the second is coming into existence. It's the trilateral commission on delimitation demarcation. I think that's what will be mediated by Russia. But other issues like landmines and, you know, the humanitarian reconciliation projects, the restoration projects, whereas we see a big role of EU, and maybe also EU can help us in terms of the funding for transportation projects. And the last to your question about the 3+3, why it's called 3+3, and if it's Georgia is not there, just to remind that those initiatives has a bit of history. Let's go back to the 90s. President Demirel, President Shevardnadze of Georgia, Aliyev at that time was speaking about the South Caucasus, some common platform. It didn't work at that time because we believe that our territory was under occupation. Now we believe we have more chances for regional cooperation. We offered that platform because, and why 3+3? Because we don't want to exclude anyone, including Georgia. But Azerbaijan fully understands the reservation of Georgia. President of Azerbaijan in April, he was speaking at the national conference. He met with his Georgian counterparts, recently Prime Minister of Georgia. We understand the concerns of Georgia. So we think that at least we will start with something, and then in the future, who knows, maybe will be some opportunities for Georgia to join to this platform. But when we see so much exclusion in around us and in the region, when somebody is, or some countries, they conduct some sort of the summits and they don't invite us, we believe that at least at the regional level we can have a cooperative framework. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ambassador. And I would like to ask both our experts, distinguished guests from Armenia and Azerbaijan, for the second half to think about some specific proposals, because yes, tomorrow the meeting in Moscow, then meeting on the summit, then meeting in Brussels between Azerbaijan and the Armenian leaders. So maybe from expert community, we can suggest something. We understand issues, how can we move forward? I will ask about it in the second part. And in regard to 3+3, yeah, now Georgia is occupied, so it's a bit tricky to talk about the format. I would like now specifically move to Georgian representative, Mr. Khaha Kemoklidze, who is a security expert. And Mr. Kemoklidze, could you please also come and make your opening remarks about situation in Georgia in regard to regional developments, international developments, and maybe also mention the 3+3 format. Please, Khaha Kemoklidze.
Thank you very much, Yegor. Let me greet all the speakers and the participants of today's webinar. Well, I would like to give sort of like a brief analysis from the security dimension and of course from the Georgian angle, how we see ourselves within the region, taking in consideration the recent developments, what has happened. I do think that Georgia used to have like three major kind of competitive advantages within the region. First one was geography. It has been the effective gateway, safe strategic corridor between Europe and Asia, and in the south at the same time, kind of safe area where all three states of the South Caucasus region and beyond could cooperate in a peace and secure manner. Second point was Georgia as a country was a beacon of democracy. Georgia has been the champion within the region in terms of democratic development, and it's with its Atlantic aspirations at the same time. It has been the safe haven for every single state within the region and beyond, I would say, to have the proper links, proper touch with the West. And third, European values itself. Georgia as a nation naturally, I think, organically had and still has the European values from a social cultural dimension within the region. Now, I would like to turn the angle slightly towards the threats. Who is the major donor in providing those threats? In my understanding, answer is really very simple. It's Russian Federation, which in my view has 5 major goals. In a general term, it would sound like to undermine Georgia in all 3 up-mentioned dimensions. But if you want me to be more clear and precise, I would list that first, their primary goal is to isolate Georgia within geopolitical dimensions and lock it down within kind of local, small-scale regional context. And at the same time, I refer on the so-called 3+3 format. The primary goal will be to undermine the state as a safe and secure geostrategic corridor between the neighboring state and other countries beyond the region. Second point, to undermine the country as a role model for democratic development within post-Soviet environment. And I think it was perceived since the Rose Revolution in 2003. Third point, to change the social and cultural DNA of the Georgian citizens, so-called ideological doctrine famous of Mr. Dugin's formula, which means that you don't need to fall in love with Russia or Russians, but you need to hate the West and their values. Portray those values as they are the key factors which allegedly could demolish Georgians' mindset and their values. In shortly speaking, actually, about the so-called Dugin's doctrine, it's all about rise of national populism and populism demagogy within Georgia. Fourth point, disengagement of the West from the region and overall Russianization of the geopolitics here, oppression of the West, and as a final result, their expulsion from the region as a whole. And fifth point, undermine the wider Black Sea regional politics and strategy of all the littoral states, in particular, the states with post-Soviet background, and to monopolize the influence within the Black Sea region itself. And we all are well aware that in recent months and in recent years, Russians are quite, I would say, quite effective in creation of the so-called area denial zones within the Black Sea. On a question, what should be the goal for Georgia, taking in consideration all the up-mentioned developments? In my view, the key goal should be to regain all three strategic competitive advantages back. Put Georgia political, political investments in big ideas which are reachable. If, for example, establishing ourselves within wider Black Sea region, work on building more bridges within connectivity dimension, more trade routes with the littoral states. And we should not forget that within littoral states, there are 2 European Union member states at the same time. Work with the Black Sea littoral partners and Western allies to strengthen Black Sea's eastern flank. This is extremely important from the security dimension at the same time. Work on new multilateral configuration of the regional politics within the wider Black Sea regional dimension, working on strengthening OSCE's engagement within the region, rebringing the West within South Caucasus at the same time. Start working on Georgia's engagement within 3C initiative project. I'm sure we all are aware about this project, the project which kind of combines Baltic, Adriatic, and Black Sea countries, 12 countries partnership, which should be, in my understanding, the long strategic goal for Georgia at the same time. And of course, strengthening the democracy and European values within the country itself. Georgia right now is making a lot of mistakes, unfortunately, as we kind of blurred the difference between the enemy and the allies. Government officials got used to criticize without any argument, by the way, the allies who are the ones trying to help you in building the statehood and keep you secure on a daily basis. And last but not least, about the 3+3 format, so-called 3+3 format. In my view, according to my analysis, it is and should not be feasible for Georgia for the up-mentioned reasons, what distinguished colleagues actually at some point listed. Yes, there is a country presented within this format which actually occupies right now 2 parts of Georgia. So technically speaking, politically speaking, it would be very hard to run the geo kind of strategic deals with this particular neighbor. And in my understanding, our goal should be more multilateralism within the wider Black Sea region and not like purely within the South Caucasian countries' regional context. That was very brief. And of course, if there's going to be any questions, I would be more than welcome to answer.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And actually, yeah, we'll move to the second part. And actually, I will start with you, Ms. Kaha Kemoklidze, because can you please also mention, but briefly, how do you see the role of Georgia in current developments? Okay, Georgia is not ready to take part in 3+3 because Russia is occupying the country. It's clear for Azerbaijan, Turkey, Armenia, I think for everyone. But like, what could be the role of Georgia in current developments? For example, Prime Minister Garibashvili offered some kind of platform between Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, plus Western countries. But as I see, it's not moving anywhere, this proposal. It's not some kind of ongoing format. And of course, Russia will, I don't think they will allow for this format to happen. So what is your view on the role of Georgia in regional developments?
Thank you very much, Igor, for a good question. I would still stick to the message what I actually already named. Why Georgia as a geographical kind of hub was important within the region. It was very efficiently used by all neighbors and strategic allies within the neighborhood. I refer on Azerbaijan and Turkey at the same time, together with other countries from Central Asia, from the Middle East, and in a wider kind of regional context, as a safe haven, safe gateway, safe link with the West. Georgia, from a geostrategic standpoint, was effectively using this strategic comparative advantage for its better future. And what Georgia, or how Georgia can contribute in this regard, yes, it can contribute by regaining the status, by regaining the status of being champion and role model in terms of democratic development, in terms of being the closest ally to the United States interest within the region, and of course the interests of European Union and NATO states. I guess it was one of the biggest geostrategic benefits for Georgia in the past years, and I do hope that we will regain this status. But for regaining this status, we should not make the mistakes which we're making. And of course, that's a very sad point. But I do hope that we will learn the lessons and continue in the right direction.
Thanks a lot. And I will now move to Ms. Sossi Tatikyan. Please, could you also speak a bit about some specific offers? Again, meeting of 3+3 format, meeting of in Brussels, summit. What could be done? We understand issues. How can we solve it? Your vision, please.
Thank you. And I actually did focus on very practical recommendations already in my first intervention. And I didn't focus much on accusing and blaming each other, etc. But now I have to address few points by my Azerbaijani colleague. Azerbaijan basically has been creating all those totally false narratives, distorting history, and making these statements for 30 years. And it was actually Azerbaijan that was refusing various proposals of the resolution of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict over 27 years, and instead conducting a very aggressive diplomacy and propaganda consisting of false narratives. And it was bringing up new generations of Azerbaijanis in the spirit of ethnic hate to Armenians. And instead of aiming to resolve the conflict, it was investing its oil and gas profits in the military industry and armed forces, apparently preparing for a new war. Yeah, Armenia was fine with the status quo. That's why it wasn't very innovative and creative in seeking a resolution of the conflict either. However, having worked in Kosovo for 3 years, in Timor-Leste for 3 years, and in African peacekeeping mission, at least one of which, Central African Republic, was based on responsibility to protect, I will tell you that the case of Nagorno-Karabakh is very similar to Kosovo and East Timor. Of course, there are no two identical conflicts. Each conflict has its specificities. And I don't want to go back to the history and say that Stalin gave Nagorno-Karabakh to Azerbaijan. It was never part of independent Azerbaijan. I don't want to go back and make a historical lecture. However, the fact is that it was Azerbaijan that started the first Nagorno-Karabakh war, as well as the second, And yes, we won in the first one. So we were the bad guys because we had won it. But in fact, we did in Nagorno-Karabakh what international community did in Kosovo or or East Timor, which means stopping ethnic cleansing that was happening. There were a number of massacres, and again, I don't want to refer to them because I want to be constructive. So now consider that the conflict is resolved. It just means that Azeris want Nagorno-Karabakh without Armenians, or Armenians in the role of a vassal, having refused from their identity and living under existential threat. And it's not constructive. And international community has a responsibility to protect the population of Nagorno-Karabakh. And yes, I am personally for the return of refugees from both sides. Yes, Armenians should return to the territories in Hadrut and Shushi, and Azerbaijanis should also return to the territories from which they have been displaced after the First War. It should be mutual. It's not only Azeris that have been displaced. There are several dozens, thousands of Armenians that has been displaced as a result of both conflicts, by the way, because Azerbaijan occupied some parts of Karabakh still during the First War. Anyway, let's get into the current situation. So it's obvious that OSCE Minsk Group and with assistance also from the European Union will continue the mediation in Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and we fully support it. Our concern with 3+3 was basically because I'm talking as an expert, it's not an official position. It may discuss some regional cooperation issues. And again, I'm very much for regional cooperation. However, it cannot discuss the conflict, and it cannot replace the role of OSCE Minsk Group. It cannot replace the EU and US. And in Armenia, we have a diversified foreign policy, and we don't really think that EU and OSCE and US have nothing to do in the region. So their role should not be excluded because of this 3+3 or 3+2 format. That's my personal concern. But if there are issues to be discussed in this format, such as regional cooperation, maybe. I'm not aware which issues can be discussed. There is one issue that I agree with my other colleague. It's about railroads. Yes, I believe that railroads should be restored in Armenia and Azerbaijan and in the region. And of course, it's a very costly endeavor. So both European Union and Russia may want to contribute to this quite costly endeavor. And with deblocking roads and communications and restoring railroad, all countries in the region may benefit, and the economic potential of the region may really flourish. As for the territorial claims, actually, it's not Armenia that presents territorial claims to Azerbaijan, it's the other way around. Azerbaijani president has been claiming that half of Armenia is Azerbaijani, even the capital Yerevan. It has been now a full year with everyday statements coming from Azerbaijani president. And about the limitation and demarcation, it should be based on international law, international human rights criteria that are reflected in the normative documents of the OSCE and EU that I referred to, as well as UN conventions. And during the Soviet period, by the way, there was some kind of strange situation when we entered the Soviet Union with a bigger territory, 30,000 square meters, and then we ended up being 24. And what happened was that during different periods in the Soviet Union, the Central Soviet government was creating enclaves, and it was also giving the control of our roads to Azerbaijani, and nobody knows why it was happening. It's a kind of a mystery that now historians are investigating. And as you know, as Vladimir Putin, Russian president, wrote in his article in July, the administrative borders within Soviet Union were very conditional. There were no certain criteria for them. And as you know, Soviet Union didn't even join the Universal Human Rights Declaration in 1948. And right now we live in 21st century. In 21st century, even national security strategies, I have actually been in lead of drafting them in 7 countries in 3 different continents, are very much developed based on human rights and human security values. So we should really keep those modern criteria in our minds. And for that, I really urge OSCE and EU contribution. And as for mines, yes, I'm personally for exchanging these mines, but I also want to note that it was Azerbaijan that didn't join Ottawa Convention that urges not to apply mines. So legally, neither Armenia nor Azerbaijan, because since Azerbaijan didn't join it, we didn't join it either, because normally that's what happens in conflict zones. Both countries should join those conventions. So we don't have a legal obligation, and it's not even in trilateral statement, but I personally think that it's a good confidence building measure. And yes, we have expressed, our Prime Minister has expressed that and gave maps, but it shouldn't be used to keep, torture, and kill prisoners of war, because in April we got 19 corpses of prisoners of war. 12 of them were citizens, and 4 of them were women, civilians, and 4 of them were women, and they were tortured and mutilated. And even the last corpse that we got back in Nagorno-Karabakh yesterday, the poor men who had got lost and kidnapped and killed by Azerbaijani border forces was actually tortured before being killed. ICG urged Azerbaijan not to cause bodily harm to prisoners of war, as well as to preserve the cultural heritage in the territories under its control, because Azerbaijan has been also damaging the Armenian monasteries and claiming that they are not Armenian, but they are Albanian or Russian Orthodox or UDI or whatever. And Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly has addressed this issue. So anyway, we can talk for hours, but the bottom line is that mutual accusations don't help, and violating international contemporary criteria, human rights norms doesn't help. So all countries should stick to the international law, international order, contemporary human rights norms, and deblock roads and communication, establish regional cooperation, and move forward towards peace. And peace consists of 2 things: resolution of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, second, delimitation, demarcation of borders based on international law and OSCE guidelines, and not on coercion to force and military aggression. And finally, deblocking roads and communication, and not demanding corridors or creating enclaves at the expense of the territory of any country. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Before I move to Ambassador Shafiev, just briefly, could you please, very short answer, tell me, we see all of these processes, we hear what you say, what Azerbaijani side say. In parallel, we hear that yes, we all want to open communications and move forward with this regional cooperation, etc. But like, is there any compromise that can be achieved in some way in upcoming future, or all of these disagreements will make this process last for, I don't know, plus 30 years? What do you think, Mr. Tatикян, please, just briefly if possible?
I think that our current authorities are so reconciliatory that for me, it's a little hard to imagine what else we can compromise, because they have used very reserved, very positive, very constructive language to an extent that it has caused some very serious domestic issues by some opposition political forces. So we have said, yes, let's deblock roads and communications. I know that I don't know the details of this, but I know that there are discussions about different itineraries, different roads within this trilateral commission at the level of vice prime ministers. And I think the bottom line, as also Russian deputy prime minister, if I'm not mistaken, stated, is that yes, Azeri trucks and vehicles can pass through Armenian road and go to Nakhichevan, but it has the road should be under the sovereign Armenian control. And yes, Russian security forces and Armenians jointly can exercise customs, checkpoints, and Russian forces can ensure the security, as it's mentioned in this trilateral agreement. And I'm not sure I understand why Azerbaijanis think that Armenian side is going to impede, while they took over two roads, Goris-Kapan and Kapan-Jakaten, that were actually Soviet Armenian roads built from Soviet Armenian budget in 1964, and only in 1980s, part of them, not all of them, were given to the Soviet Azerbaijan, only 21 kilometers out of 64. And as a result, 6 villages appeared in basically in isolation. And now our government is building alternative roads, but it doesn't solve a lot of freedom of movement and employment and education issues. So it doesn't look like Azerbaijanis are constructive. They take over a road from us, and then they do everything so Armenians wouldn't be able to use that road. At the same time, they demand an extraterritorial corridor and accuse us in impeding their movement, while there is no any evidence of that we have such an intention. So I think that our side has demonstrated a lot of compromise, and even our participation in this 3+2 is an evidence of it, because yes, I understand that Georgia has problems with Russia. Yeah, and we have problems with Turkey and Azerbaijan. They are not less than Georgia's problems with Russia. In fact, they are more, because we have no diplomatic relations and we have been in a conflict forever. However, even the fact that Armenian side has expressed some interest in taking part in this 3+2 is a huge compromise, and it's really a demonstration of a goodwill. So, and the rest, again, yes, we have agreed, and not only agreed, but we have been actually more active than Azerbaijan in offering the delimitation and demarcation process. But again, Azerbaijan should demonstrate goodwill and first withdraw its forces from the sovereign Armenian territory, such as Sunik and Gerargudik, before it accuses us in, being non-constructive, and return prisoners of war. This would be a huge confidence-building measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Understood. Please, Ambassador Shafiev, your remarks. You heard again very different positions from Azerbaijani side, from Armenian side, OSCE 3+2, and etc. So, where the compromise and whether any chance to move forward, please?
Sometimes conversation between Armenians and Azerbaijanis about history or current situation, indeed we have opposite views, but resembles me the famous movie Austin Power, when one of the protagonists says, I hate people who are culturally intolerant to our cultures, and also I hate Dutch. So basically, when first part of the sentence denies the second part of the sentence. So of course we all claim that we are tolerant, and we are on the side of the international law, and the opposite side is not. That's why I think all these platforms which we have now, trilateral, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Russia, now the Brussels is coming. And let's not forget about Georgia. Let's recall that in June, Georgia also mediated the swap between landmines and detainees. All these platforms can be useful for moving reconciliation, moving peace. This is the distant goal. What, in terms of the compromises, I think Azerbaijan made enough compromises. We handed almost 1,600 remnants of the Armenian soldiers to the Armenian side. So we diligently worked with the Russian side and with Armenian side. So 1,600, so 1,600, even more. I thought even the latest figure was 1,700. During the one of crisis when the Armenian didn't get the gas through Georgia, we delivered gas, the Russian gas, through our territory. The Armenians was using unimpededly the road through our territories, and I won't agree that these territories somehow belong to Soviet Armenia. It is our territory. And so almost for 10 months, unimpededly, the Armenian side used the Goris-Kafan road. And that was the example as good gesture, so that you can use it further if we will have the same opportunity for unimpeded movement. Unfortunately, the work of Trilateral Commission, which was created, as I said, on 11th January in Moscow, was basically stuck in the summer. We've been told that there's the elections in Armenia, we have to wait, but after elections, things was not moving well. Just recently, the work of this Trilateral Commission resumed. So we are moving despite all that. We are moving with the landmine issue. We are moving with some of the detainees issue. Hopefully, we'll start again. The Trilateral Commission on deblocking is moving further. By the end of the year, we should have Trilateral Commission on delimitation and demarcation, and that, let's hope that will be also some sort of the progress. We can also think of some other trilateral. Now I'm speaking Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia. Why not? Let's think what we can do together. And for Brussels, for me, it's hard to say now what the concrete result will be from Brussels meeting. But again, whereas in my introductory remarks, I already mentioned that some areas of cooperation and, in terms of reconstruction, in terms of the projects in transport, which can be usefully beneficial. At least it will, if we will start moving with small steps. Look, my statements and statement of my colleague from Armenia, we are on opposite side. We are, but on some issues, these two governments, they are moving. Though I believe we are moving with some a bit of the coercion, but still we are moving, and it looks like will be some movement further in December. Trilateral commissions, as I mentioned. Of course, the final goal is the peace, return of refugees. I would even think of further, not only returning Armenians to areas in Karabakh, and Azerbaijan is there. I would say, I personally will be dreaming about returning to the mosaic of pre-conflict of mosaic, when the Armenians can return to Baku, and Azerbaijanis can return to Yerevan. I always said that we have not forget that we had thriving Azerbaijanis, I mean, not thriving, but the thousands Azerbaijanis living in Armenia, in what areas we call Zengezur, we call it Sunik. We had very large Azerbaijani population in Yerevan. So that was the part of our history. As far as the OSCE Minsk group, I'm a bit skeptic about that platform because the latest proposal from OSCE Minsk group was the Madrid Principles, which was elaborated in 2007, 2009, updated was declared in 2009. And for 11 years, we didn't have any progress. And actually, Pashinyan government denounced Madrid Principles. First, they said we need to change the format of the negotiations, and then they basically denounced in March, April 2020. So what we're going to discuss? The Madrid Principles was stipulated for the peaceful resolution of the conflict. We, through the military means, yes, we acknowledge that. We made Armenia to withdraw from territories around, I mean, from Azerbaijan territories, first from this Agdam, Kalbajar, Lachin, and the rest we've taken liberated militarily. So, so what to discuss now? So, because the status of Karabakh is no longer relevant. But apart from that, I think some other platforms can be very useful, and we have small progress in those tracks. Thank you.
Yeah, Ambassador, please also very brief question. You just said about some military actions, and recently and today also, actually, I read on some Telegram channels, people died in some different places from time to time, some maybe not large scale, but confrontation is taking place. So do you exclude possibility of some kind of a big military confrontation in the future between Armenia and Azerbaijan, if, for example, this agreement will not move forward?
It will be naive to think that we will have full peace. I mean, after so many years of conflict. Of course, skirmishes can happen. And today, unfortunately, Azerbaijani soldier was killed in Kalbajar, and 2 civilian workers were killed by landmines in Dashalti, near Shusha. So it brings again the question of the landmine contamination. It brings the question of the demarcation and delimitation. But I doubt that we will have the in our war in near future, at least, because speaking frankly, Armenian army is destroyed. So, but skirmishes, yes, they can happen.
And one more, if possible. And also, Armenian workers also were killed some time ago. And actually, the question here not about it's a tragedy, it's very, very, very dangerous, etc. But like the question is, I'm very sorry, where are Russian peacekeepers that should ensure security in this area, and people still die there?
It happened in Kalbajar on the border. So today's incident. So Russian peacekeepers is not deployed over there. So in Karabakh, in the line, in the area where the Russian peacekeepers deploy, more or less stable. Yes, there are some casualties during this year. As I said, they probably will happen in the future, but I don't expect any major, violence happening there.
Thanks a lot. Mr. Khaha Kemoklidze, please, your closing remarks. And I would like to ask you, yes, we understand everything that should happen in Georgia someday, but like we have what we have, and you already said some words, your views about the situation in Georgia. Is Georgia ready to counter the pressure in regard to this 3+3? For example, Moscow is making statements every week about Georgia, that Georgia should join the format. Do you think Georgia is capable to resist this pressure and keep on moving the way you told about? Please, Mr. Khaha Kemoklidze.
Thank you very much, Yegor. Well, there is a saying that when there is a will, there is always a way out. So if there's going to be a will and firm positioning from the Georgian government, definitely there's going to be a capacity to resist the possible pressure coming from the Russian Federation, which we face on a daily basis through occupied regions and many other dimensions at the same time. I would, in my closing remarks, I would say very quickly and briefly about Georgia's possible role within the region. In my understanding, colleagues, distinguished ambassadors emphasized about the possibility of mediation, which was a case in the recent months by Georgian government. And I think it was a very good case, and it might be one another example how Georgia can be helpful in maintaining or enhancing the peace and stability within the region. This should be the spot where colleagues from Azerbaijan and Armenia can talk with each other, and this should be the spot where the West can be brought in back at the same time. And if Georgian government won't make mistakes, if Georgian government will make Georgia look like more pro-European, more European value-based, I think it will be doable. And I do hope that we will reach a target and later we will reach those goals. Thank you very much.
But sorry, brief question. With you say about if, with the situation we have on the ground, is it possible for Georgia to be resistant to some kind of Russian pressure and challenges we're talking about in current situation with what we have now?
If Georgia, let's say, makes the Western allies, the true friends of the country, be more irritated, and if the Georgia fatigue will rise in Washington and in other European Union states and in NATO capitals, it will be harder and harder, I would say so. But in my understanding, there is still room for maneuver for the Georgian government to redirect the line and the itinerary, wrong itinerary at the same time for this very day, and put more investment in building or rebuilding the ties with the West, which has been the strategic advantage for the country within the several years ago. And I do think that the rationale will prevail in the minds of the Georgian government, and the mistakes won't be done anymore.
Thanks a lot. And please, 1 minute and 1 minute, Ms. Sossi Tatikyan and Ambassador Farid Shafiev, your closing remark. Let's start with Ms. Tatикян, please, but very briefly.
First of all, thank you for organizing it, and it's useful to have this kind of discussions. And of course, it's obvious that when you have a representative for Armenia and a representative from Azerbaijan, they are never going to agree with each other on most of the issues because there are very polarized, contradictory narratives about the conflict and the situation, both the past and the present. However, I think the main points are that Nagorno-Karabakh conflict is not resolved, and everybody except Azerbaijan believes so, including Russia, OSCE, US, EU. And there is a need to find a comprehensive, long-lasting, durable solution of the conflict based on human security and human rights-based approach. Second is delimitation and demarcation. Now we will have the start of the process. And by the way, just to correct the Azerbaijani colleague, it's not a trilateral commission. We expected it to be trilateral, and actually it came up as a surprise to us after Sochi that it's 2+1, where basically Russia has a consultative voice only, which I believe is very wise by Russia, because in 2021, it would be strange to see a third country to have an arbitrage kind of voice in border negotiations between two countries. And that's why I'm emphasizing the role of international organizations such as OSCE or EU umbrellas, as it has happened in other conflict zones of the world. I think that if there is no consensus on a number of issues in this stage, then in the next stage, they need to get involved, providing an organizational umbrella and the normative framework to reach consensus. Otherwise, it can again cause military escalation and use of force, and which again will be already a real challenge to international order and law, which becomes normalized, which is actually very tricky, because now we see that there are tensions in Balkans after many decades. So it's a bad precedent internationally to regularize and normalize the use of force while this is solving disputes. I remember last month, the Registrar of International Court of Justice gave a very interesting interview, and it said, if two countries have disputes, whatever disputes, including territorial, at the end they can go to International Court of Justice like Ethiopia and Eritrea did. But they shouldn't start a war and start, a war against each other. Yeah, and finally, again, yes, deblocking the roads. I hope that there will be some progress in Moscow this month, and that Azerbaijan will refuse from its maximalistic intentions that are not compliant with international law, and agree on deblocking roads and communications, and to launch regional cooperation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ms. Tatикян. Please, Ambassador Farid Shafiev, your closing remarks.
We see South Caucasus as would like to see as a region of peace and cooperation based on obvious principles of international law, sovereignty of all three countries, territorial integrity of all three countries, and of course, based on that basic principles, we can build the cooperative framework in economy, in culture, in humanitarian areas. So definitely, there are some disagreements, and the platforms which we have now, I mentioned different commissions. This is at least we see as a way forward. But if in the course of negotiations, let's say, or the meetings in Brussels or in some other places, something will come up which can have added value to this process, then of course the Azerbaijan is ready. We are not like in favor of if any country will monopolize this process. No, actually, even 1 year history from the last war shows that we are working with a number of partners, including Georgia. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks to all participants, speakers, ambassadors, diplomats, and experts for taking part. This is a South Caucasus Dialogue Platform format meeting, and we will meet in 2 months. Wish you good holidays for a new year.